Good morning, everyone, and thanks. It's nice to see a full house and everyone here on time, so we'll press on. So we only have one apologies for absence, and that's from Councillor Cronley. I think everybody else is here. We'll move on to the emergency evacuation procedures, and I'll pass to Luke on that one.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Good morning, everybody. There's no planned fire alarm this morning here at Lansdown. So if the fire alarm does sound, please use the exit there or at the back of this room here, and a uniformed member of staff will take you to one of the staircases out into the beautiful Lansdown sunshine.
Escape the nuclear bunker. Okay, moving on to declarations of interest. We don't have any advised, but are there any that have come up since anybody wants to raise? No? Brilliant. Okay. Agenda item 4 is public access, and we have received one statement from Councillor Self, which the clerk will read out.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is a letter received from Councillor Kaz Self, dated the 12th of March, and it's headed Public Statement for 14th of March, comments on a recent report in the Bristol Post. It was with extreme disappointment that I read the report in the Bristol Post on 11th of March about bullying, misogyny and discrimination in Avon Fire and Rescue Service. When I announced I was transgender to my colleagues at Rolls-Royce in Patchway in 2018, it was one of the bravest things I have ever done. When I walked into the office as a trans woman, I knew it was going to be hard, that I would need to be resilient, to challenge stereotypes and face up to possible bullying, misogyny and discrimination. I had seen it before in the 1990s. Why would it be different? Well, it was different because my company had changed its culture. It had become a place where harassment would not be tolerated and where inclusivity was welcomed. I am the first openly elected transgender woman councillor in Bristol. I have had to publicly face the residents of my ward of Southmead to try and win their trust and votes. I was successful, and it was a great honour to take over from Brenda Massey as the new Southmead councillor, the same Brenda Massey who was the first female chair of Avon Fire and Rescue Service. Every day I see comments about transgender people in social media, almost every single one derogatory. Food for the banter that, according to the report in the Post, is endemic in your organisation. Avon Fire and Rescue Service attends Pride, yet mocks people like me in private. You are an absolute disgrace, and I'm prepared to call you out on that. But you can change. Like my old company, Rolls-Royce, changed, you can strive for a high-performance culture where everybody can be their best, where all are welcome, and where all citizens of Bristol know you are acting for them. Change comes from the top. The management of Avon Fire and Rescue Service need to be the drivers of culture change and stamp out toxic behaviours. It will be painful for some at first, but in the long term it will be worth it. I'm willing to talk to leaders and all colleagues of Avon Fire and Rescue Service about workplace behaviour if you so wish. Please feel free to write to me at the address above or by email. Kind regards, Kaz.
Thank you, Amanda. And we will obviously be discussing that issue in much more detail later on the agenda. But you all should have a copy of that on your desks in front of you. Okay, so we're moving on to Chair's business. Welcome everyone to the meeting. I'm confirming for the recording that this committee meeting is taking place at the South West Command Development Centre at Lansdown. We are also recording the meeting for the public to view on the Fire Authority YouTube channel. So I will ask first off members to introduce themselves. I'm Councillor Goggin representing Hartcliffe and Withywood Ward from Bristol City Council, and I'll go to my left. Tim?
Tim Kent, Councillor for Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Ward, Bristol City Council.
Good morning, Matthew Riddle, Councillor for the Severn Vale Ward in South Gloucestershire.
Good morning, Councillor Yasin Mahmood, Lawrence Hill, Bristol City Council. Good morning, I'm David Powell, I'm the independent member of the committee.
Good morning, I'm Councillor David Wilcox from Lockleys in the fine city and county of Bristol.
Hello, I'm Councillor Jane Stansfield for the Thornbury Ward in South Gloucestershire Council.
Good morning, Councillor Onkar Saini from Bath and North East Somerset.
Good morning, Martin Williams, Councillor from North Somerset, Kewstoke Ward.
Fabulous, thank you all. Now I will get the officers and others to introduce themselves. Again, I'll go to my left and start with Amanda.
Good morning. I'm Amanda Brown and the Clerk and Monitoring Officer of Avon Fire Authority.
Good morning, I'm Verity Lee, Statutory Finance Officer.
Good morning, I'm Caroline Taylor, Head of Corporate Assurance, Continuous Improvement and Planning.
Hello, Becky Yates, I'm the Health and Safety Manager.
And I'm Alice Bugden, I'm from RSM UK, who are the Internal Auditors.
Good morning everyone, Mark Jones, partner with RSM. We provide the Internal Audit Service and I act as the Head of Internal Audit.
And good morning, I'm Simon Flood, I'm Performance Manager for Avon Fire and Rescue Service.
Good morning, I'm Lorna Wynne Yates, Corporate Risk Advisor.
Good morning, Emma Bowen, Democratic Services.
Good morning, everybody. Luke Gazzard, Assistant Chief Fire Officer for Service Delivery.
Thank you, everyone. And I've just put my phone on silent because I'd forgotten, so if I can just remind everyone to do that. When you're speaking, can you please use your microphones, not just for the people in the room, but again for the recording. And when you've finished, please turn them off. Voting today will take place by asking members for a show of hands. I will ask for any votes against, any abstentions, and then finally for votes for.
Can I just interrupt? Sorry, I'm just going to hand over to ACFO Gazzard for a quick announcement.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Chair, as this is your last meeting as Chair of ADROT today, after chairing this meeting for 7 years, I just wanted to say a thank you on behalf of myself and the service for the support you've given us over these 7 years, as you're going to be moving on to the Chair and the PRC meeting as well, so it's really appreciated with your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting that. Moving on to agenda item 6, which is minutes of the extraordinary meeting of the AJOC, which we held on Valentine's Day. So I have the minutes here. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to scrutinise. Does anybody have any amendments or corrections? No? Okay, well then I will move that they are an accurate representation of what went on. May I have a seconder? Matthew, cheers. So I will. Are there any votes against? Any abstentions? And votes for? Brilliant. Okay, I will sign those and pass them on to the clerk. So moving on to agenda item 7, which is the performance report, current financial year to December 2024. And I think Simon's presenting on this one.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning again, colleagues and councillors. Yes, so what we have in front of us is the performance report, which is looking at our performance against our corporate metrics for the first 9 months of the year. So it's looking through April through to the end of December. As usual, it's supported by 2 appendices. So the first one is our corporate scorecard, in Appendix 1, and that lists all of our corporate metrics that we measure, organised under the Safer Community, Stronger Service, and then the elements within them of the things we're trying to achieve. So prevention, protection, response, resilience, improving our service, and investing in our staff. And then at Appendix 2 is a subset of those same indicators that is produced at Avon level and also at each station, and it just gives a more graphic format that hopefully is helpful to station staff and to members of the public, and we display those on each of our fire stations, the relevant chart. Okay. we use a very simple mechanism when we're measuring our performance of a red, amber, green. So red indicating that it's off target, amber indicating that it's near to target, and green indicating that it's on target. And as you can see on the scorecard, I'm pleased to report that the vast majority of our performance indicators are showing as green. So I think we're doing a reasonably good job in making sure that we're meeting, if you like, our promises to the public that we serve to achieve the indicators that we have set out and we've agreed to measure. What we do at this meeting, and also with our service leadership team, is very much look at the indicators where we're off target and make a decision from the metric owner about whether we think we need to treat that indicator by doing something different to make sure that we're going to get ourselves back on target to meeting it, or whether we're going to tolerate it. And usually where we're tolerating is where we've looked at it and thought that it's not a significantly off target. It's just changing as things do with time. So we decided not to put any particular things in to treat it. So there are 4 indicators that are off target and showing red at the moment, and those that we're going to look at in more detail today. Firstly, there's one under the prevention, which is off target for completing home fire safety visits. Home fire safety visits are where our fire crews and our firefitters go out to people's homes on a risk-based basis of looking at the people who are requested the service or we've targeted and trying to do the interventions to those whose need is the most. And we go out and give education and also fit smoke alarms where required. We are off target for it, and the Area Manager Prevention and Protection has recommended treating the risk and have set out in the paper what we're planning to do, but in summary what we're looking to do is to increase the referrals we get from partnership agencies, which is our main mechanism for identifying people who would most benefit from an intervention. We've also appointed a new community safety engagement lead who will lead us to make sure that we get sufficient number of referrals from agencies. We're also continuing to promote the online home fire safety check system, which is a government-based system that allows any member of the public to access a single website, put in your information, and it puts the information through to the relevant fire and rescue service for that area. So that's what we're planning to do to get ourselves back on target for that one. The second one we want to look at is under protection, where we're off target for completing operational fire safety checks. These are new for this current financial year, and it is where our operational fire crews go out to business premises and basically do a basic fire check to ensure compliance with the Fire Safety Act. Members will remember that we've had a change in the way we set the target for this through this year, which hasn't helped us to meet the target. At the moment, at the end of December, we'd only achieved 58.9% of the target, but I'm pleased to report that by the end of February, we've gone up to 85%. We have very good information about which of our stations and watches is on target and off target, and the station managers are actively targeting the watches that still need to achieve some in March, and we are confident by the end of the year that we will meet the target we've set ourselves to do. Okay, thank you. Thirdly, under resilience, we're off target for reducing the number of sickness days for our staff, and we measure that by calculating the number of days and then dividing it by the full-time equivalents, which is a reasonably standard way of doing it in the public sector. It's unlikely we'll meet our end-of-year reduction target, but on a positive note, we've included the benchmarking information in the paper, and you can see from the benchmarking information that we actually benchmark quite favourably against other fire and rescue services. So our sickness levels are lower than the average, and we had the 6th fewest days lost to sickness per full-time equivalent of all the fire and rescue services who had submitted data to it, which is pretty much all of them. So we're reasonably pleased with that, but to say it's unlikely now that we're going to meet our end-of-year target. The head of our new people services team, who's responsible for this metric, is recommending treating the underperformance, and the information about what we're planning to do to treat is included in the paper. But if I can summarise that, what we're looking to do is to increase the focus within the people services team and in the wider service upon the health and well-being of our staff through a dedicated team within the people services team. So we'll have staff who are focused upon trying to achieve and promote the health and well-being of our staff, one of which is about sickness absences. We're also looking to continue to embed the supporting attendance toolkit that's been in place for about a year now, but we still recognise there is work to do to make sure that it's consistently applied across the organisation. And we've also digitalised the process for reporting sickness and the management of sickness. So we've tried to make it for our staff as easy as it can be through digitalisation. But we recognise that there is still work to do in ensuring that the processes relating to sickness absence are complied with. You can see from the information that the Head of People Services put in there is we still have some issues with staff returning from sickness and not submitting medical certificates to us, and some managers who are not recording the fact that they've undertaken a welfare check with that member of staff when they've returned. So what we're doing with that is we have the information about the ones where we are not achieving that, and we're actively going back to those managers and members of staff to make sure that it is complied with. But it is an ongoing thing, and we recognise that it's something that we need to get better with. Okay. Finally, under improve our service, the scorecard shows that at the end of December, we only had 46% of our policies that were in date, that had not gone beyond their review date. The report also highlights that we had in some ways created this ourselves by reviewing all the policies and then putting in the same review date for all of the policies. So we'd looked at them, but rather than staggering the review date, we created a bottleneck by saying that they'd all need to be reviewed by the same date. Probably not a sensible thing to do, because we created that bottleneck and it put too much work onto our managers all at the same time. So what we have done to treat that is that we have scheduled the majority of the reviews, all of the policies that have gone past their review date to be reviewed within the next 6 months. And we've asked the metric owners to look at the policies, to make decisions about when they can complete the review of that, and to schedule them in and inform us about when they're going to do that policy. And we will need to make sure that we actively monitor that to make sure that in 6 months' time, I can come back to you and say that all of the policies are in date. And we're confident that if we manage this properly, that is something that we were looking to be able to achieve. The policies being out of date wasn't a specific action within the last Banishes Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, the HMIC improvement, but it was something that was referred to in the HMI report about us that a number of the policies were out of date. So we recognise it's something that we need to improve upon. Okay, that's pretty much all I wanted to say with regard to the performance. So if I can invite any questions, and then we'll seek to take the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Simon. I've just got a brief question on the sickness, on the resilience. With the benchmarking you provided, I think it says that we're somewhere down towards the bottom there. Is it 4.68, or is that's the national average, is it? That's okay. And if you'll excuse me, why is that so different from the year-to-date actual of 7.1? and the target of 6.08, that would again put us towards the top of the that benchmark.
Apologies, I'm not sure I got that bit. Target of?
It says the year-to-date target in the scorecard is 6.08, and then looking again at that benchmark, if we did achieve 6.08, that would put us third, I think, on the list there, or somewhere around about there.
Yeah, so our target again is after 9 months, whereas the benchmark information is just after 6 months. Yeah, so it's looking at different periods, and apologies, I should have made that clearer in the report. So
Yeah, no, sorry, I get it now.
Okay.
It's just different periods. So
that's right, yes, thank you.
thanks, it just seemed a bit odd. Okay, I'll open up for questions.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. One about something you said that employees are not sending in their sickness certificates into you. Is that not a function of HR? And is that not a part of the employee's contract that they should be sending these things in, please?
Yeah, so by HR, that's really what we mean by the new People Services Directorate. So it's renaming it as the HR to make it more focused upon what they're trying to achieve, which is services for people. And you're quite right, it is something that is written into legislation for statutory sick pay as well. So it is something that we need to improve upon with our, if you like, discipline within the service to make sure that we do make sure that these are submitted.
Thank you. And
Sorry, Councillor, can I just come in there and add to that? Yeah. We're just going through an implementation of widening our use of Firewatch, which is a HR-based system. Currently, the sick notes that firefighters or any member of staff fill out go to a certain department. We're putting ownership back down to stations for our operational crews, so the local managers will record that, and it will be a fully digitised system, so the performance should improve once we go through that digitised system as well. At the moment, it's very paper-based.
that's good to hear that Firewatch is filling that particular gap, because it's a very important gap. My other question is about the policies that are late and not up to date. How many of the policies, I think we've got 20 out of 52 policies, how will they actually be reviewed and qualified as being valid policies? Are they peer reviewed, and do they have any benchmarks, please?
By benchmark, do you mean with other fire and rescue services, or?
Other fire and rescue services, and also I'm thinking about equality rights and things like that.
Caroline, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I'll come in. So the policies do go through a process. They were part of the transformation programme, and a clear process which included consultation, technical review, all those elements are included, and part of that consultation will ensure it goes to all the relevant teams, for example, the DICE team and HR, to check equality rights and making sure they're all applied. So that's how we ensure the policies are valid. We have that process which allows everybody to comment and look at those policies. We also, as part of the prioritisation for those that are out of date, we've recently asked, obviously, policy holders to identify when they need to have those policies reviewed, but we've asked them to do a risk assessment, looking at factors. I've got the risk assessment here. You know, does the policy prevent harm to our staff or the public? Is the policy driven by legal or regulatory obligations? You know, how crucial is the policy to the service and day-to-day operations? And could the failure cause reputational damage? Does it promote staff well-being? And does the policy support the longer-term strategy of the service? So they've been asked to score all the policies against those key categories, so we can see, and I've now got access to a list which tells me for the policies what the scores come out, and we can see which of the policies that scores higher in those areas, and therefore are higher priority policies to ensure we're managing those risks. So we've been quite robust in going through a thorough process, because we recognise we've got policies out of date, and we want to make sure we're now prioritising the ones that need to be done first.
That's good. I feel much more assured about the process. Thank you.
Tim.
Thanks, Chair. I noticed on the second score sheet that the response to flooding incidents had increased by 10% on the previous year. I was just wondering, do the local authorities and the Environment Agency either seek reports from you, or do we provide reports to them on repeat flooding areas? Because obviously they're supposed to be developing action plans to reduce flooding, and sort of the fire service is picking up the pieces where perhaps that's not happening.
Yeah, it is the current system we use to record incidents that we attend is provided by the Home Office, and it was developed in 2007, so it is a little bit out of date, and it is being reviewed at the moment, and should be the new system will come online hopefully this year. Part of the problem with the flooding incidents is it combines everything together where there is water that is called damage. So it could be a flooding incident because your domestic water supply has broken and it is flooded and affected the electrics, or it could be more general flooding. Certainly if it is more general flooding environmentally caused, we always inform the Environment Agency of the incident. I believe as well our risk intelligence team use Environment Agency maps about flooding when we're looking at calculating risk. So we certainly keep each other informed about that. But as I say, unfortunately, the way the incidents are recorded is I can't tell you without going through each individual one which ones of these are domestic flooding and which one are more environmental. And it's something that, well, I think the new incident recording system that is due to come online this year will change that, so it does give an indication of the nature of the flooding.
And Luke just wants to come in on that one.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in, Councillor. We also carry out a review during our community risk management planning, which we do on an annual basis for all of our risks in Avon, just not flooding. And that dedicated team reach out to stakeholders like you've just mentioned to share some historical data, but also to look at the risk in the next 5 to 10 years as well. So we're constantly reviewing that planning process.
Thank you. David.
Thanks, Chair. Just following up Councillor Wilcox's question around the policies, how critical is getting the framework of policies reviewed and up to date for the HMI? Is this a critical point? And the other one is, I think your summary is right. There's only 4 in the red, that's excellent, but I think the committee needs to feel assured that the targets are challenging enough. If the targets aren't challenging, they're going to go green quite quickly. How do we know as a committee that these go through a process, maybe through the management team, of making sure that they are appropriately challenging? Thanks.
Thank you. It's something at the members' briefing, which is scheduled for April. We have a slot on there when we're going to talk to members about how we set targets. Without wanting to spoil the anticipation of that, basically we look at benchmarking information, so we share that with Fire and Rescue Services. We can't do it with all of the indicators. So it used to be easier when there was a suite of best value performance indicators. Those of us who've worked in local government for a while will remember those, which meant that each Fire and Rescue Service all kept the same performance indicators, or at least a basic set of them. Those were abolished a number of years ago, so the benchmarking is more difficult now because some Fire and Rescue Services have changed the way that they measure things. So we always try and make it that you don't, so we can benchmark, and we can still benchmark on a number of the indicators, and information about where we can is included on the right-hand columns of the scorecard. So basically, yes, we will be talking about that at the members' briefing in April, but I'm very conscious of, it should be challenging. And we don't want to just set things so that it shows green, because we want to be trying to drive down risk in the community to ensure we're meeting our objectives.
Caroline.
I'll just come in on the policy question for HMI. So HMI will look at some of our policies and strategies, and as part of their inspection process, they do actually request up front before the inspection that we supply them with a list of certain strategies and policies. So we have quite good sight of where their focus is. So some of the policies that we've got, they will be less interested in because it's not an area of focus or key line of inquiry for them. but
Right.
we are aware
Thank
of the policies that we need to focus on for HMI.
Mark, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just by addition, it's the policies, whether they're up to date and fit for purpose, are clearly of interest from an internal audit perspective when we're reviewing an area that's relevant to those policies. So it's always a starting point for an audit. Have you got one? Is it up to date? Does it cover everything we would expect it to cover? And that will be a key part of any internal audit findings as well.
Thank you. Do you have something else, David?
Just very, very briefly, I just wanted to emphasise the point, because I think that's, looking at the FOI processing time, that's one of the best I think I've seen for a very long time. But was it one FOI? Was it 10 or 100? Look, you don't have to answer. You can get back to me on that. And apologies, I should have given you some advance warning, but that's the point I'm making, Chair. So I'll leave it at that. So it's really getting the scaling right. Yeah. Thank you.
I can supply that information. It's that we do have a lot of FOI requests. The Information Commissioner Officer set a standard of 80% as being the acceptable benchmark, and we well exceed that. So we are performing particularly well in our handling of FOIs, so I can assure everybody in that respect.
So around about 300 we'd had to the end of January. So, yeah.
Thank you. I've got Onkar and then Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, just got a question on the welfare checks. What actions being implemented to ensure the compliance with welfare checks after sickness, given the current compliance rate 76% against the target of 90? Sorry. So what actions are being implemented to ensure the compliance with welfare checks after sickness, given the current compliance rate is 76% against the target of 90? Thank you.
This team is at my area, but I will answer as best I know, and maybe Luke might be able to come in and support as well. But we do have a thorough reporting on welfare checks, and we report around the service those that are out of date and haven't been done in time, and a list is sent round to managers to make sure that they are being chased up and that staff are complying. The process has obviously been looked at by our people services team, and they're always reviewing how we can improve those checks. In terms of the attendance management, we had an audit done last year, and that did give us a reasonably good rating in terms of our processes. So the issue's more around compliance and getting managers to comply, and that's why we notify their line managers when they're not being done. But I don't know, Luke, if you've got anything further to add.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely key to support our people when they return to work for their health and well-being, and this is why we introduced this metric. It's absolutely key, and again, it was like a previous point that was mentioned, Councillor Wilcox. This is now becoming a digitised system through the Firewatch portal, so we've made significant improvements of this metric over the last 12 months, and we're seeing the fruits of those now. We're not quite there yet, but I think in the next 12 months we're going to improve even more in that area.
Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my first question is really the opposite to David's regarding the targets and the matrices. In terms of the home visits, that obviously this has been an issue for quite a long time now, and it's still showing red. And I think the performance from last month is going down. So my question was the opposite, really. Are we setting that target too? Is it too challenging? Is it too ambitious? And so I'll wait for the April meeting to understand a bit more about how we do set targets and the sort of the backstory on that. So I'll look forward to the April meeting on that one. The other question was on the policies. I mean, how nuanced is your policy list? Because obviously I suspect some policies need refreshing or looking at every year or 2 years. Some policies may not need looking until 3 or 4 years down the line. So do you build that sort of nuance into your list of policies? Thank you.
The standard policy default is 3 years, but it is up to the policy owners to make a decision on the need to how regularly they need to review their policy. And obviously factors like changing legislation, changing papers, things that are changing will all play a part in that. But we do have a standard default, and then it's left to the policy owner to make a decision based on the wider context that's going on.
Could just come back on one further point, and that's a reflection on what Tim said about flooding. The EA have just published a new national data, a new tool called NAFRA2, which looks at, you can actually put your own postcode in and find out your risk of flooding over the next 50 years. And unfortunately, it is getting worse, both flooding by sea and by surface water. It's all on the up, which to be expected, really, given the climate change. So, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Do we have any other questions? No? Okay. Sorry, Yasin.
No, thank you for your report and the explanation. I got a little question. My question is, you just mentioned apart from sickness, is there any other obstacles that you're not going to meet the target? I know you say you're going to meet at the end of the year, but is there any obstacles that you think, we can help you?
So, sorry, for the sickness, anything that...
Home visits.
Sorry, excuse me, yes. So the home visits, yes, certainly what we're looking to do is to improve or increase the number of referrals that we get. So it's something that I think would be useful possibly to speak to the head of prevention and protection, to ask him potentially to reach out to councillors if there are agencies that we can tap into that will be able to give us names and addresses of people who we think we may be at risk. So I think we can take that as an action to be in contact.
Just to give some more context around that, we've recently recruited a new community safety engagement lead who reaches out to partner organisations within the community, and they started in January, and already we've seen a rise in referrals. All those referrals do not turn into home fire safety visits. We need to be mindful of that, because we target the highest and the most vulnerable people in the community. And during my recent one-to-one with the head of prevention and protection, we discussed if there's any capacity for firefighters to do more and take ownership of their own local station grounds in a way that they're not currently doing. So I've tasked him to come up with a framework for operational stations to generate their own visits to the most vulnerable and then be able to book them in themselves and complete those visits. So I'm expecting to see a rise in the next reporting year, not necessarily this year, given that we're so close to the end of the year.
If I could just ask a question as well, I don't know, Simon or Luke. As councillors, if we have details of vulnerable people, what would be the best way for us to report that to you to organise?
I think that's something we could come back to you and look at the mechanisms. So there is a national reporting tool. Otherwise, you can contact us directly. But I think if we could send round to members some direct contact, I think that would probably be the best way to do it. But we'll get back to you about that.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? No? So the recommendations are that we are asked to approve the 4 metric owners' recommendations as followed. Prevention, completing home fire safety visits. We treat the level of risk with the mitigating actions outlined in the report. Protection, completing operational fire safety checks. We treat the level of risk with the mitigating actions outlined in the report. Resilience, working days and shifts lost to sickness, excluding on-call. We treat the level of risk with the mitigating actions outlined in the report. And improve our service, percentage policies in date. We treat the level of risk with the mitigating actions outlined in the report. So I'd like to propose that we follow those recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Jane? Thank you very much. Are there any votes against? Any abstentions? And votes in favour of following the recommendations? Thank you very much. Sorry, Simon.
Can I just add one thing that I just wanted just to clear up, just in case members are concerned about this, but on the sickness where we say that we exclude our on-call, it's not at all because we don't value the on-call staff. It's just with our on-call there isn't a concept, if you like, of a shift or a day. So on-call, when they're unavailable to work due to sickness, they will book off and say they're not available for the period of time that they are not well, but that doesn't, if you like, calculate as a shift or a day. So we do measure our on-call sickness, but we can't calculate it in the shifts per full-time equivalent, which is what we do for other staff. So just wanted to make that clear, just in case there was any concerns.
Thank you very much, Simon. Okay, we're moving on now to agenda item 8, which is the annual internal audit opinion 24-25, including the progress report and the internal audit plan for 25-26. And Mark, I think you're presenting this one.
Thank you, and good morning again, everyone. So if I could just take you through the first report from us, which is our annual internal audit report for 24-25. So the first thing to note is that this has got draft report written all over it. The reason for that is that we're not actually at the end of the year yet. There's still a couple of weeks to go till we get to the 31st of March. So what this report is doing, it's giving you an early view of what the opinion is almost certain to be. We're unlikely to change anything in this report because we've done all of the work that we planned to do. The only event that could possibly change anything in any significant way in this report is if something happened disastrously to the service from a control related incident that we would need to reflect in the opinion. So if something happened in the next 2 weeks, we might then need to just think about how that might impact on this report, but we think that that's hopefully an unlikely event. So we're presenting it in that context. Once we get to the 1st of April, we'll then issue a finalised version of the report. So the report, it does two things really. Firstly, it just provides a summary of the work that we have done for you at a high level. Now, that is not a surprise for you because all of the work that we've done has already been through this committee in detail, and you've seen that and discussed that. But you can see a summary of that in Appendix C. And what you'll see in there that over the year we have performed a number of audits. We issued no high priority actions, which was a real positive. All the actions that we've needed to agree have been of a medium or low priority nature. You will see that across the audits that we've done that there were two partial assurance opinions, so they are negative opinions, and you will recall they were on asset management and business continuity. But there were also two reasonable assurance opinions and an advisory piece of work. We've noted in the report that there's been really good progress in the implementation of actions, and we place a lot of store on the fact that where we have identified a weakness, management have agreed to do something, and we have seen evidence that they have done it. And so there is some good evidence of continual improvement, and that's a really positive factor that we take into account when we're thinking about our opinion. And it's particularly important that we had seen good progress in implementing the actions on the asset management report, which was one of the negative opinion ones. So there was that area has moved forward positively during the year, which again helps to influence our overall opinion. We've also taken into account that the audit areas that we were looking at during the year are driven by the risks, and we are steered towards some areas of known concern. So in some respects it's not surprising then if we do find things are not quite as they should be, because the organisation is using internal audit perhaps in the way that it should be intended to confirm that there is an issue and to come up with ways to improve that, so we get that continual improvement. So we've taken that factor into account. And we've also noted the significant developments in the risk management processes that have been adopted during the year, and in fact that you've had some national recognition for that, because one of the areas that we're required to conclude on is risk management, and so the really positive developments in that area has again been something that we've taken into account. So that's some of the factors that we took into account when we developed our opinion. So let's cut to the opinion then. So the opinion is shown on the second page of our report. We're required by the public sector internal audit standards to give an opinion on risk management, governance and internal control. You'll see the opinion that we've given there is it's a positive opinion. We offer 4 opinions, 2 positive and 2 negative. It's very rare that we offer the higher level, the highest level positive opinion. Very, very rare. The opinion that you've got then, therefore, is that second level of opinion, which is basically saying we're comfortable, but there were some areas where improvement was needed. That is the opinion that you received last year. It's the opinion that probably 80% of the internal audit reports that we issue get around about that opinion. So it's the opinion that we have developed, and just to sort of give you some comfort, it's the opinion of myself as the head of internal audit, but it goes through a second partner independent review within RSM, where there's a degree of sense checking and challenge to make sure that there is no independence issue from myself giving you that overall opinion. So I think I'll pause at that point and take any questions on this report.
Do members have questions? David.
Thanks, Chair. I think some of the introduction answered the parts of the questions I wanted to raise, but the first is 4 audits were covered, so that's the number of audits. If we talk about the quantification of the audits, that's correct, isn't it? So 4 audits.
It was 5 audits plus the follow-up.
Yeah,
work
4.
That we do.
There was a follow-up, but the core is 4, isn't it? So I think it's important for the committee to understand that you're confident enough to say this is adequate and effective on page 2, and yet only, and I'll put only in inverted commas, 4 audits were carried out. So my question is just a response to make sure you've issued a professional opinion, and thank you, I think you've covered that very, very well. But I just think for the committee's point of view, on a minimal number of audits, I personally believe a minimal number of days, you're able to form an opinion. And if I've got that wrong, please tell me.
Yeah, so slightly wrong. So if we look at Appendix C in the list of audits, there are 5 audits in there. So, but one of them is an advisory audit.
It's advisory,
but we still take into it, we don't ignore any internal audit findings, and under the internal audit standards, we're allowed to do advisory work, not provide an opinion. We don't ignore it. If that advisory work had identified massive weaknesses, we would clearly take that into account in their opinion. So there's 5 pieces of work in there, plus the follow-up work that we report on regularly through to the committee, and in this report there is a summary of some of that follow-up work. So 5 audits plus follow-up. We are comfortable, based on the risks and nature of the organisation, that this is the sort of level of coverage that will allow us to provide an opinion. And we'll talk about this when we get on to the next agenda item, the plan, that there was sufficient depth and breadth of coverage for us to provide that opinion. So from our perspective, we believe that we've got the resource, input, and the breadth of coverage to be able to give that opinion. And as I said, it's been independently reviewed within RSM as well. So just I guess a little bit of comfort in that we do audit quite a number of fire service organisations, as well as similar police authorities, police and crime commissioners, and so we're not just basing this on, oh, we only do one, we haven't got a clue what the audit coverage should be. We've got significant experience in this sector.
So I think it's really important that you're saying that the scale of the audit. So you're saying the scale of the audit is sufficient to give this committee assurance?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And if I can just follow up on that as well, you said something, and I think that's really good for the committee to hear, because the direction of travel in terms of improvement has played a part in you coming up with the classification that you've given. Had that not happened, would it have been different?
There is that potential that for example, that asset management report, negative opinion done earlier in the year, if we'd have done our follow-up and we'd seen that, well, actually they haven't done anything that they said they were going to do, so we got to the 31st of March and it's still like it was when we did the audit, then that would have been a factor, and that could have potentially, well, it would have certainly moved our thinking downwards. Whether it would have gone underneath the sort of bar, you know, it's a hypothetical thing. Yeah.
David.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some questions about the partial assurance about business continuity. Was the documentation part of the policy documentation that's late that Simon just talked about? If it was late, about being updated, what priority are management giving to this? Because it's essential that business continuity is part of the core things that Avon Fire and Rescue does. Oh, that'll do for starters, please.
Was that a question for me or
So
for
I just jump in. We don't have a business continuity policy, so this wouldn't form part of the policy. We obviously have a process for business continuity in terms of the business and impact assessments and the business continuity plans that all areas of service and teams have to have in place and are regularly monitored and looked at. And the audit did look at whether we had up-to-date business continuity plans, but we don't have an overarching policy.
Okay, so policy and procedures are obviously going to be different, I understand that. But what priority is the management of Avon Fire and Rescue giving to this, please?
I think it's in line with how we manage our plans and policies. We review them monthly. We've done that recent risk assessment that Caroline mentioned earlier, and then we're just driving that performance improvement if they are out of date. But I'll give an example for the plans for business continuity. I met the business continuity team earlier this week to review some plans on industrial action as an example, and there's 4 different plans for different departments, and they were all in date, and they're confident that most of their plans are in date.
That is gratifying to hear. Have His Majesty's Inspectorate covered this at all?
Not to my knowledge. The focus on the next themed inspection is resilience, which you would expect business continuity. So we are planning for that, but I'm not sure what they've done historically.
That's gratifying to hear. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? No? Okay. Mark, do you... Oh, sorry, Caroline.
Just jump in. We also have a business continuity steering group that meet regularly as well. We've got membership for business continuity, and we have a set agenda where we look and ensure we're following robust processes, best practice, and we also do regular practice exercises as well. So it's just some extra reassurance in terms of that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Back to Mark for the second part of the agenda item.
So the second part that we've got here is our proposed plan for 25-26. So this is an important document for the committee to consider, because obviously it will set a part of your agenda for the coming year in terms of the work and the assurances that will flow through to the committee. So just to say that we've developed this with management. It's based around risks as usual, and also we take into account, what do we see elsewhere in the sector, what are the emerging risks, what are the sorts of areas that we're seeing similar organisations having issues with, and we build in that sort of knowledge and challenge. To pick up the point that was made earlier, so I can confirm that from a head of internal audit perspective, I'm comfortable that we've got sufficient breadth and depth of coverage. We're not focusing all the audits in one area of the organisation. We're covering enough to allow me to give an opinion at the end of 25-26. I just wanted you to note that within the plan you will see there is some contingency in there where we haven't proposed what the audit will be. We put at this point a series of options, which it could be, but that doesn't mean that there may not be something that may arise during the year that may be more significant than the options that we've put in there. Because what we will say that although we're asking for you to consider this plan at this point, it's not cast in a tablet of stone that if risks change and it's appropriate for internal audit to look at something new in response to those risks, then the plan can be flexed, and we will be flexible in bringing in a new audit if that is what is required. So I think I won't run through all the audits in the plan. I'll take that as read, but I'll take any questions on it at the moment.
Thank you, Mark. And looking at your 2.1, the internal audit strategy, you've got ticks, obviously, under financial controls, but also stores prevention and service planning. And I noticed they've not been audited at all before. Is that correct?
It's correct from RSM's tenure. I don't have immediate access to what might have been done historically.
Thank you. Okay, I'll open to questions. David.
Thank you, Chair. Will you be following up on the two partial assurance items that we talked about in the previous item?
So there is an ongoing follow-up that we perform, that we report through to every committee meeting, where just in advance of the committee meeting, we look to see which actions should have been implemented by then. We discuss with management, have you implemented them? If they haven't, we don't bother following it up, and we'll report that they haven't been implemented. But if they have been implemented, then we will perform detailed testing to see that has the action been taken. But not just that, has it also achieved the benefit that it was expected to achieve? Has the right outcome been achieved? And that will be reported through to the committee. So those partial assurance opinion reports and all of the other actions that have been agreed on the other reports will be followed up as those actions become due.
Does that come out of the contingency section that you're talking?
No, it comes out of our management section.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. Mark. Any other questions? David.
Comment really. I think it's really good to hear that you feel that this will enable you to give your opinion. I mean, it would be pretty poor if you didn't say that, I think. But it is really comforting, I think, for the committee to hear that. I just wanted, if I may, to follow up a comment earlier on. You said that your company looks at other fire and rescue services, authorities, and police. And you're finding the number of days that you've got fit within the range that you see elsewhere to deliver your opinion?
That's right. We certainly do. We obviously know what we feel comfortable with, and this is within that sort of parameter for similar sized fire authorities. I guess the other sense check that comes from that is that there is a regular, within the marketplace, a regular tendering for quite a lot of these. Not all of them go out to tender, because some of them are done by their local councils and they don't get tendered. But where they're done by the private sector, there is a regular cycle, and I think that sort of helps create a sort of a benchmark about what the industry is comfortable with, for this sort of provision.
Yeah, follow up. That's really helpful to hear. But I think it's also probably, as you'll understand, important for the committee to keep testing. Is it enabling you to form your opinion? For us to have the confidence at the end.
One of the requirements of the committee, if we're to follow good governance is to assure yourselves that internal audit is appropriately resourced.
Correct.
And I should be telling you if I believe it's not.
Yeah, correct. And it's also to make sure that we're comfortable with the coverage as well, which you're clearly laying out today. So thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Do we have any other questions, queries? No? So, the recommendations are that we consider, firstly, the draft annual internal audit opinion 24-25, and then we also consider approve the internal audit plan for 25-26. So I'm going to move to a vote and deal with them both in one, if that's okay with everyone. I propose that we have considered both and that we approve the internal audit plan. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you very much. Martin? Any votes against? Any abstentions? And votes in favour? Thank you very much. So now, moving on to agenda item 9, and obviously this item has generated some interest and press coverage. Firstly, I'm going to pass to the Assistant Chief to introduce this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think what the plan here is for me to just give an overview of the paper, the cover paper, then I'll pass to Mark and Alice at RSM to give some more context around the report. So I feel it was really important that I just provide you some context around how this started and why we asked for this audit to take place. This audit was over and above our contractual obligations with RSM, but as they're our chosen provider, we decided to use them for their HR knowledge in this area. So there was a recent discipline investigation involving a supervisory manager within our control room. That investigation followed due process and ended up with an outcome. Roughly about the same sort of time, we initiated our Professional Standards Board. And the plan with our Professional Standards Board and investigations and hearings, the outcome will go to that board and they will review that process to see if there are any individual or organisational learning. And they had some concerns, potential concerns, should we say, around some of the comments made within the investigation report, and they were based around the culture of our control and comms team and also the leadership of that team as well. So that got raised to Service Leadership Board, and we decided to ask for an audit of that particular department within service. Now that's quite unusual, and we believe we're the first service in the UK to ask for a specific cultural and leadership review into a specific department. We have in the past, and all other fire and rescue services do cultural reviews on the whole organisation, but I think that just shows our maturity of where we are in terms of our progression of culture. We want to actually look at specific departments, and we are brave enough to lift up that stone and take on the findings and commit to resolving and making our workplace for those dedicated people a much better place to work. What I think is really key that I get across to you all is this has not affected the performance of that team at all. We have a number of KPIs and performance measurements within that team. The one that Simon went through earlier, which was on the report, I'm not sure if anybody noticed, we answer our 999 calls within 7 seconds, and our target is 94% of the time, and we exceed that constantly, overachieve that. So there's been no impact on our delivery and to the members of the public in this case. So the report was done, and I found it very difficult to read, to be honest with you. But I think we need to acknowledge it and be brave enough to move past it and engage with our workforce to resolve some of those issues and the recommendations. There are 12 recommendations within the report and some key findings, which Alice will cover in a bit more detail shortly after. We've started to engage with members of our control and comms team already. I have strategic oversight, which I will bring back into this meeting at appropriate times to assure yourselves as committee members that we're travelling in the right direction. What I think is key is there like I said earlier, it's hard to read that report, but there are some positive areas in there as well, and they're focused around the people within those teams. They are extremely dedicated and passionate about their roles and the service they give to members of the public and other areas of our service as well. So I think we need to be mindful of that. They've been instrumental, and I've designed and led 6 workshops so I could share the recommendations with them alongside the area manager response and our health and wellbeing lead. We had a 3-pronged strategy to deliver those 6 workshops, and we listened and we shared the report with them, and we took on board their concerns, and we're shaping their thoughts into the delivery on how we progress as well from here. I think this is not about a revolution of that department, this is about evolution. I really think it's going to take a bit of time to do. I don't want to do this quickly. What I want is sustainable change across those teams. It's really important that the teams are included as stakeholders to shape what this looks like going forward, and that is how we're designing our action plan moving forward. So I'll just leave it there, and I'll pass over to Mark from RSM to continue.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you. Just a couple of things that I just wanted to pick up, really. Firstly, to say, just to perhaps echo the point that's just been made, but to be absolutely clear, this was not conducted as an internal audit. It wasn't part of the audit plan that we've just seen the overall results for. It was conducted as an advisory consultancy piece of work, and as a consequence it doesn't have that sort of usual assurance opinion that you might have expected to see from a piece of work done by RSM. So we just want to make that clear, that it hasn't followed the usual internal audit process, methodology, discipline. It's an advisory consultancy piece of work, which is what we were actually asked to do. The second thing I wanted to do was just introduce Alice here. So Alice is an HR specialist from RSM, the lead auditor on this, and so she's the best person to take you through the recommendations that have been discussed. But I'll leave Alice to take you through very, very briefly how you went about the actual audit process, the context, and what you actually found and agreed with management. So over to you, Alice. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So just to set the scene a bit, I'm going to take the paper as read, so rather than going into the findings in detail today, what I'll use today to do is to summarise the recommendations made. Many of the recommendations are linked to one another, so rather than reading them all out one by one, I can give a summary of themes and provide some context around why we feel the recommendations are important things to do, really. So I'm making reference to page 8 of the RSM findings report, so that we're on the same page. Of course, apologies. Is that better? So our first set of recommendations you'll see relate to taking proactive and decisive steps to eliminate misogynistic, sexist or discriminatory language. And aligned to that, we have 2 recommendations we've made. And one is to deliver some refresher training on identifying and preventing harassment at work. And the second is to ensure that we have a no-tolerance approach in place locally within the department. And these recommendations are important really because employers have a legal obligation to handle discrimination and harassment in the workplace, and importantly to take preventative action. So our recommendation on refresher training is partly driven by an update to employment legislation that came into force at the back end of last year, which increased the onus on employers to take preventative steps to prevent sexual harassment at work in particular. So delivering some refresher training will serve to make sure there is that knowledge about identifying and preventing what sexual harassment might look like in the workplace. And our recommendation to ensure that there is a no-tolerance approach in place locally is it's an acknowledgement of the positive impact to be gained from role modelling of behaviours by those around us, and in particular from leaders within the department challenging inappropriate behaviour when they see it and hear it. Our second set of recommendations around talent and career development opportunities for control staff. So we've raised 3 recommendations here, which are to review the promotion policy to ensure that it's suited to control staff and that it's fair, to consider options for enabling career mobility within the service for control staff, And linked to this is a recommendation to review all temporary promotions within control and explore whether any of them can be made permanent. And these recommendations are driven by the fact that having a positive talent development and career mobility framework in which staff feel a sense of job security as well as a feeling that they have opportunities and something they are working towards is likely to have a really positive impact on culture. Our third set of recommendations is around management cohesion and effectiveness within the department. So we've raised 2 recommendations in this area. One is to begin a regular control station manager update meeting that might be fortnightly. And the second is to consider whether any adaptations to the physical workspace and the layout of the office might be appropriate to help with that. And these things are important to do because cohesive management teams are built where there is mutual understanding of one another's workload, challenges they're dealing with, successes they're experiencing. And so these recommendations are made with that in mind because we feel that that is likely to have a positive impact. Our next recommendations are around workload and resource management. So we've raised a recommendation here to conduct a review of the staff establishment and distribution of workload across control. And this is about generating an up-to-date understanding of capacity levels, so ensuring that there is general parity between people's capacity and the outputs that are expected from them. And also ensuring that tasks, duties and responsibilities are sitting with the right resource to enable some confidence that people's time is being spent in the right way. And finally, the next recommendations are around leadership and decision making. So we've made a couple of recommendations in this area which relate to leadership being consistent in applying the policies that are in place. And secondly, to engendering good quality, transparent internal communication and mechanisms for that. And these recommendations are driven by really recognising the positive impact that comes with driving behaviours from the top, as we talked about earlier, and bringing about a sense of trust through modelling the policies that are set in place for everyone. And this sense of trust is also elevated in teams where people feel communicated with, so that might be about departmental changes or it might be about the reasons behind decisions that have been made. And that's achieved where leaders have a methodical approach to disseminating the right information at the right time and to ensuring that there's not people hearing about things at different times and what have you. That's the end of the recommendation, so I'll pause there and I welcome any questions.
Thank you. I think the Assistant Chief just wants to come in first.
Yeah, if I could, thank you, Chair. If I could just come in and give the committee a sort of a flavour of some of the areas that we look to improve in the short term, but also work on areas in the long term as well. So there have been a number of leadership changes within the team, and we're looking at further changes as well. And we've also looked at some structural changes as well. And I'll just give an example of 2 of those areas. The critical comms part of control has now been aligned with our IT department and our new head of IT following his 90-day review of the service. Thinks that department is best sat under him, so that gives us a more efficient, effective and resilient comms strategy moving forward. I think it's really important to identify that we've also got a cause of concern for culture at this moment in time, and some of these themes actually align with the cause of concern for culture. So there's some work that we're currently doing that will move across into our control teams to be delivered as well. So we'll be able to look at how we can become a bit more effective in that as well. Just in terms of the promotion policy, ironically touching on one of the policies out of date, I made a decision to make sure that policy went out of date because I wanted our control teams to be fully involved in the consultation of that document, and that's why that one's out of date. So I think that's due to expire at the end of March, actually, so it'll be back in date by then, but they are continuing to be consulted on in that. Yeah, and I just think I'll open up for questions from there.
Thank you, Luke. If I can just indulge my own questions just to start with. Mainly to you, Luke, I suppose. So this situation was highlighted first in, obviously not to looking for details, but was highlighted with a disciplinary procedure. We then, in effect, self-referred to investigate this culture when we thought that there was something happening. It's disappointing, actually, to hear that, with my experience of Avon Fire and Rescue Services, that it's all one big family, and it seems as if control has been somewhat left behind. I'm not entirely sure about the career development, why the rationale behind the thinking of restricting applications from within that. I don't know if that's also the same from corporate or not. But I'm encouraged overall with the recommendations. Do you want to answer some of that, please, Luke?
Absolutely, thank you, Chair. I think the context is this was one discipline in control. We haven't had lots and lots of disciplines, so I think that's the context I would like to get across. That's not to say I'm not recognising that there are issues there at all. In terms of career development, this is a UK-based issue for fire and rescue services. I'll give a flavour of some other services around the country allow their control and comms team, who are really dedicated, highly trained with unique skills, to move into other areas of the organisation. There's huge benefits to that. It also comes with challenges, especially for a small organisation like Avon. So I'm a big believer in trying to encourage career development out of that department for short term at this moment in time, to develop, share their skills and knowledge and gain more skills and knowledge to bring back into the control room to aid that culture and development of the whole team. So I think that's something we need to look at, but we're also mindful that our control firefighters and managers are on different contracts, different pay scales, different pensions, and that brings about a challenge for us as well. So we're trying to work that through. We're engaging with the teams. They're happy to do it. They want to do it. I want it to happen. We just need to create a framework to ensure that happens.
Thank you, Luke, and I'll open up. David.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask you, Luke, if the control room staff received the same training as in culture and diversity as your normal fire station staff?
Yes, everything is identical and moved across the whole organisation.
And are there going to be any lessons learned from that to apply to all station staff, please?
Absolutely. This will again be fed not just back into this governance committee, but it will also go back into our professional standards board to highlight any learning for the organisation or individuals.
Thank you. And one last question. Was it recognised in the training that the profile of the control room staff is probably different in terms of gender diversity and the other forms of diversity than the standard fire station staff?
Yeah, I think operationally on a fire station is predominantly male. In the control room and comms team, it's predominantly female. So that's the difference. Yeah.
And can I also ask one final question? What's the profile of gender in terms of the management staff in the control room? If you can answer that without breaking GDPR.
I'm not sure I have that data to hand. I think it depends on what level. If we're talking middle managers, predominantly female. Supervisory managers, I think there's a mix, maybe 50-50, but I can find those details for you. I don't have them to hand.
I think that would be useful to interpret this report, please.
Yeah, okay, great.
You, David and Luke. Yassine, and then Tim.
Thank you, Luke. Got serious concern about hearing 2025, this issue, culture. But I don't want to go further as investigation is ongoing, and you confirmed to us, everyone member here today, that you're looking with high priority to sort out this issue. But please, can we have more culture awareness sessions to have the staff members, rather than just waiting the procedures to follow? Because it's very sad to hear 2025 again, we have this issue. Thank you.
Luke, did you want to?
Absolutely, yeah, we can build that in, most definitely. Yeah.
Thank you. Tim.
Thanks. I think as part of our audit and governance, we should sometimes ask questions that we don't necessarily support, but just ask the question. And I was part of Avon Fire Authority when the South West Regional Control Centre was brought in, and government tried to impose that on us, and we resisted to keep our own control. So I was just wanted to ask, as part of your recommendations, was there a reason why you did not propose that we close control down and join the Regional Control Centre at Taunton?
I'll pick that up. That wasn't part of the scope of this audit at all. It was to look at the culture within the that element of the organisation, but not to look at other options of providing that service. So that's a significantly different type of review.
I guess I would put that question to you, because although I want to make very clear I'm not advocating it, I think we should ask the question.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, and I appreciate the question. The Joint Control Centre for the South West got stopped by government a number of years ago, so that didn't actually happen. It didn't happen, so
Is the building empty at all?
I think it may still be empty.
It's not empty. It's a diagnostic centre now for the NHS. Just to add that in.
So that was probably a number of years ago,
After
Councillor.
all those meetings where ministers came down and beat us up and they never even opened it, right? Well, forget that question then.
Thank you, Chair. Onka.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, thank you for the report. And as Assistant CFO already explained, that we got like short-term operational changes while working on the long-term commitments. So just a few questions around the recommendation. So the first one is, are there any new parameters will be considered for the use of temporary promotions moving forward? So that's the first one. And the second, what trainings and upskill opportunities will be considered for control staff?
So I think, sorry, Onka, can you repeat your first question? Sorry, just lost it there.
Yeah. Are there any new parameters will be considered for the use of temporary promotions moving forward as per the recommendation?
I think the control and comms team are a really small, dedicated team of around 40 to 45 people. And just because of different projects we've got ongoing at the moment, we've had to create additional capacity. But we can only do that in the short term. So we've had to short-term move people, which has created a gap. So somebody's got to fill it with a temporary promotion. We do and have had a new control station manager in place, and she has reviewed all the temporary promotions, and we've made a number of decisions recently, and a lot of those have been substantiated and made permanent.
Second part to the question. So the question was, what about the training and upskilling of control team? I think, yes.
Yeah, I think this is a two-handed strategy, I think. We will work with our culture lead who are working on the HMI Spotlight report in terms of culture and our cultural action plan to look at training and development across the whole organisation. But we are also going to analyse if there are any specific development needs for people or teams within that control setting. So that piece of work is being carried out at the moment, carrying out that analysis.
Thank you. And also, just about what will be the format and the frequency of the regular station managers' update meetings?
So we have a new group manager starting in control who's from the operational side of the business. They're starting on the 1st of April, and they will be holding regular 2-weekly update meetings with their middle managers, so fortnightly.
Thank you, Luke. David?
Thanks, Chair. I think the recommendations are really strong recommendations that will help the service take things forward. But I just wanted to wonder, obviously you can't go into too much detail, but this was only exposed through a disciplinary procedure. That's right. So the question is, given where the authority and the service is with regard to the improvement journey following the inspection, what does this mean for that journey? And are you going to reassess the measures you're putting in place, given the fact that I'm going to say this suggests this might have been a surprise when this came out. Thanks.
Thank you. I think our action plan needs to be absolutely sustainable, and I'm not, like I said earlier, I don't want to get this done quickly. I want to make sure it's sustainable change that develops people, but also makes it a much better workplace experience. So there's a question for me that I've left undecided at this moment in time about when we carry out the next review, but we will carry out further work to survey our members of the team within those settings to see what their thoughts and feelings are. I'm thinking potentially 12 months because I need things to embed and that culture to change. I don't want to do it too quickly.
Quick follow-up. Given what has been found, do you anticipate doing a follow-up review?
Absolutely, yeah. It may not be in the form of with RSM, it may be another set of questions from another team or person.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Well, if I could just say that I'm encouraged by also the transparency of dealing with this issue, the fact that the report has been published in full in public and we've had a chance to discuss it. I can see that the service aren't backing away from this and they want to resolve it. So we are just asked to scrutinise that report, which I believe that we have done. So we'll move on to agenda item 10 now, please, which is the External Audit Plan 2024-25 accounts. And I believe Verity's going to present on this one.
Thank you. Yes, so I am presenting on the External Audit Plan for the 24-25 financial year. So unfortunately our external auditors, Bishop Fleming, couldn't be here today. So I am presenting their plan on their behalf. So I will do my best. If there's anything I don't know, I'll take it away. So this plan, there's one appendix to this paper. So Appendix 1 is on page 89, and that's the plan that Bishop Fleming have published today for your approval for the audit for the year ended March 2025. So this plan really, it defines their audit approach, it defines their approach to materiality, and the significant risks that they've highlighted as part of the initial planning work that they've done, and that planning work is ongoing. It's relatively unchanged from the audit plan for the prior year audit. So the 23-24 audit, which we've just signed off, was the first year audit for Bishop Fleming. So this is their second year. The findings from the 23-24 audit have informed their planning, but actually haven't changed anything significantly in terms of their approach or the risks that they've identified. There is one risk that I wanted to mention, just because it's a new risk, and it's not because of anything we as a service have done or the way that we operate. It's just a new accounting standard. So IFRS 16 is a new accounting standard that we have to adopt for the first year during 24-25. So it's just because it's a new accounting standard, they've identified it as a significant risk to make sure that they perform the required level of work to ensure that we are adopting that standard correctly. The second page of my cover report on page 86 just picks up a couple of key points and from the audit plan. And paragraph 5.3 talks about the timetable. So the audit fieldwork is expected to be completed during July and August. So the planning work has started. We've done some interim deliverable work for them, so we've given them some bits of information. They'll continue to work through that and then complete their final audit fieldwork during the summer. Their intention is to report back to this committee in September. In terms of audit dates, we did have some backstop dates confirmed during the last calendar year. So for this audit, so for the year ended March 2025, we have an extension still on the publishing of the draft unaudited statements. So we have until the 30th of June to publish those statements. And then we have until the 27th of February 2026 to sign off that audit. But based on the plan and the timetable that Bishop Fleming are presenting today, they're intending to sign off that audit before the end of 2025. And that's all I was going to say, so happy to take any questions. And as I say, if I can't answer them today, I'll take them away for you.
Thank you, Verity. Yeah, it's rather disappointing that we haven't got someone, and you're left carrying the can, so to speak. But I'm going to open up to questions. Do I have any? David?
Yeah, just say, I think it's a solid timetable, but the question I've got is, am I right in thinking, Verity, that Bristol City Council provide some of the information to help support the delivery of the final account? are they going to be able to, so the question is, are they going to be able to deliver within the timetable that we've got here? Is that a risk? So that's my question. Thanks, Chair.
I think it's not a risk. We work with Bristol City Council to design a timetable for preparing the accounts prior to audit. So we prepare a timetable, we send it over to Bristol City Council to make sure they're on board with that, and they build that into their work plan, which has been done now. Over the last few weeks we've been doing that process. Their main input is in the preparation of the accounts. So as long as we have their support in preparing these accounts, we can hit the deadline in terms of publishing for public inspection. They do support in terms of the audit fieldwork, and we have already had conversations around holidays because it's during school holiday time. So we all have already communicated dates that people aren't available with Bishop Fleming so that they can tailor their approach to support that.
David 2 or David 1, I'm not sure which.
David Wilcox of Workpool. I'd like to go back to the partial assurance that was given by RSM about financial controls and asset management, particularly in terms of how the assets are actually recorded. It doesn't seem to be part of the data that's on, if I can find the right page, 94 of the big bundle. Is there going to be any work done in that area about how the assets are actually recorded and transferred between the two software packages, please?
I think they, and again I'm answering on their behalf, but they have completed their 23-24 audit and now have an understanding of the systems and processes we have in place. So they've obviously designing their 24-25 audit with that in mind. I'm sure there will be some procedures, but there'll be procedures to ensure that they are happy with the value of the assets at the year end, and that we're recording those accurately in terms of the transactions and things. They obviously haven't. They didn't raise a recommendation in their external audit on that transition process, but they do look at internal audit reports and to inform their plan. So they will be using findings from internal audit, or having that knowledge in their mind as they approach the audit, the work that they complete.
That's gratifying to hear. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? No? Good. So the recommendation is to approve the external audit plan for the year ended 31st March 2025, and I'd like to propose that we do so. Do I have a seconder? David Wilcox. Thank you. Now you're asking. Okay, thank you, David. Do we have any votes against? Do we have any abstentions and votes in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 11, which is the outcome of Health and Safety Management System Audit and Annual Health and Safety Report for 2024-25. And I believe Becky's going to present on this one.
Thanks for that. So I'm just going to give a brief overview to begin with. So the report I'm presenting today is in two halves. The first half is the outcome of a consultancy that we had with regards to our department back. It was commissioned in 2023, and the outcome of which we received at the beginning of 2024. And the second half of my report is the annual report for the last financial year for our department, with some of those implemented changes that came about as a result of the consultant report. I won't go through it all because the contents speak for themselves, but I will give a little bit of a background as to why we had the consultant come in and do the report in our department. It was for two reasons mainly. We had a reduction in the number of qualified and experienced personnel within our team. It is only a team of 3, so it doesn't take much to get that reduction. And because of a turnover of health and safety managers over the last few years, there were some questions around where we were with regards to keeping up with work streams, which in turn leads to questions around whether we are legislatively compliant, and how our management system works and is effective within the organisation. So the consultant report, which is an appendix on the report that I've produced, it came up with 33 recommendations, all of which we adopted. And then as a department, along with our higher management, we turned those recommendations, a few got amalgamated because they had similar themes, and we turned them into a number of action points that we were going to take forward as a department. We risk assessed those action points and started to produce the work streams as necessary based on the level of risk that it posed in our organisation. The consultant also helped with that because he did his own risk assessment on them and scored them high, medium or low. And as of today, which is just over 12 months later, we're only 2 of the actions that are still outstanding at the moment, and both of those are due to be started this year. There's more details within the report, and I'll leave it there and open to questions.
Thanks, Becky. Questions? Nothing arising. Okay. So we are asked to scrutinise the contents of the report, which I believe we've done. So thank you very much. And we'll move on to agenda item 12, which is the full corporate risk register review. And Lorna, you'll be presenting on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again, members. So I'd like to present this paper today for scrutiny. The Corporate Risk Register is subject to regular review by the Service Leadership Team and is presented to this committee 4 times a year, twice a year in full and twice a year as an exception report. So today, the full Corporate Risk Register is in front of you. So each of the 16 corporate risk areas has a risk owner who regularly monitors and reports on the risk events that sit within their remit. Each corporate risk event is evaluated for likelihood and impact before any mitigations so that we can calculate an inherent risk score. The risk owner records existing controls and considers their effectiveness in mitigating against the likelihood and impact of a risk event in the present risk environment. This allows for a current risk score to be calculated. Risk owners also provide details of any planned actions that are relevant to the management of their risk events. Just to inform you that at the moment, and continuing over the next couple of months, risk owners are engaging with improvement work around their existing controls. They have got a little bit out of control on the Corporate Risk Register, and there are too many bullet points, and we want to get rid of sort of the low-level part of the furniture controls. So I'm being quite strict with them, and we will be left with only good quality controls that will be listed. We will also identify metrics as KCIs, key control indicators, to ensure that we can measure the effectiveness of those controls in mitigating the causes and consequences of risk events. And this will all feed in as well as we become more digital, and we can have automatic triggers and metrics and have data flows throughout the system. So if I can ask members to turn to Appendix 1 on page 149 of your committee papers, thank you. Appendix 1 is a dashboard providing a visual representation of all the risk events on our Corporate Risk Register and their current risk score as of the 26th of February, when they were reviewed by the Service Leadership Team. The 61 risk events here are shown within the riskometer, or the risk category to which they align. This is how each risk event is held to account and colour-coded in relation to differing risk appetite and tolerance levels that were set by the Service Leadership Board just over a year ago and reviewed and amended this January. Please note that risk events that align to our security risk category are reported in an exempt exception not for publication. You can see 4 corporate risk events are shown in red font as they are out of tolerance, and 7 are flagged and written in blue font as risk scores that have changed since this committee last met on the 12th of December. So all 11 of these risk events are presented in full detail in Appendix 2. So if I can ask you to turn to page 151, where you'll find those full risk event tables. In Appendix 2, these are the full tables for those 11 risk events flagged in the dashboard in Appendix 1. First of all, we have 4 tables for the risk events with current risk scores out of tolerance. Now, these were reported as out of tolerance to you on the 12th of December, so they haven't changed. Starting with an IT risk, namely CR 13.5, extended loss of availability to local area network or LAN. The progress of the LAN refresh project is now at 92%. The paper shows it at 88%, but I got an update yesterday, and our head of ICT assured it was at 92%. But the head of ICT will not reduce the risk score until that project is complete. So once the LAN refresh project is complete, There are 2 sites remaining. The score will come down and will be reported to you. Moving on to CR15, which is a pensions risk. CR 15.3, pensions risk around failure to acquire accurate data from Bristol City Council. The score of 18 reflects the lack of assurance on data accuracy and future data access arrangements. This was reported in this way in December and is an ongoing risk that's being monitored and managed and reported on a regular basis. On page 152, we have a service improvement risk sitting under CR19. CR 19.2, failure to plan and deliver the medium-term financial plan efficiency savings requirements within agreed timeframes. Please note that in January of this year, the service leadership team approved a slight wording change to this risk event because it had only referred to the financial year 25 to 26, but longer-term requirements need to be considered. The risk event has received much scrutiny at all levels of leadership, as you'd be aware, and at the Fire Authority meeting on the 14th of February. Strategies and plans are in development to complement the medium-term financial plan, and full detail is given in the risk event table. Finally, in this subsection of risks that are out of tolerance, on page 153, we have the financial risk event, CR 20.1, lack of appropriate funding to adequately fulfil the service's aims and objectives. The risk event has been scored at 20, i.e. probable and major, for over 3 years because of ongoing funding uncertainties and the efficiencies needed to support investments in the service over the next 4 years, and this will likely to remain at this level and be repeatedly flagged as out of tolerance for your scrutiny. And that's how the leadership team would like that to be, due to obviously its importance. So from page 154 in Appendix 2, we have the full tables for the 7 risk events where the risk score has changed since the 12th of December, where you scrutinised the exception report for the Corporate Risk Register. Firstly, under financial systems, we have CR 11.1, inability to produce accurate and timely financial information to support internal and external requirements. This risk score has actually been changed twice since the 12th of December. It was reduced from 18 to 13 during a deep dive at the SLT on the 18th of December, but was increased back to 18 at the SLT meeting on the 26th of February. And I must apologise, in the middle of the table, there is a slight error. The current impact level should show as major, not moderate, and the current risk score underneath the riskometer should read 18, not 13. It is colour-coded amber. All the other information in that table does reflect the fact it's currently sitting at 18, which is intolerance, albeit obviously high, and that does attract scrutiny. We don't just wait for it to go into the red and out of tolerance. So the fact the score needed to return to 18 very recently is because of ongoing negotiations with Bristol City Council regarding contract renewal, and that will continue to be scrutinised and updated, and hopefully the score will be able to come back down in due course. Next are 3 separate risk events under CR 14 Fire Authority Assurance. CR 14.1 ineffective inquiry and assurance by members, and CR 14.2 inadequate information provided to members were both reduced from 13 to 12 during a deep dive presentation at the December SLT meeting to reflect the unlikely probability of these risk events occurring. This was due to progress made on governance review recommendations, training and access to information. So that was reassuring there. Turning to page 157 is the third CR14 risk event, CR14.4, ineffective delivery of service plan strategy and priorities. This had its risk score increased during the deep dive at December SLT from 8 to 13 due to a re-evaluation of impact rather than a risk increase as such, following detailed assessment of current status and improvements that need to be made around service planning and team annual plans, etc. On page 158 is a buildings risk sitting under CR17, CR17.4, failure to apply adequate controls to contractor works. This was reduced in score from 18 to 17 during a revisit deep dive at the January SLT meeting due to reassurance around this risk from the property team. Planned actions that are detailed in the risk event table are aimed for completion by the autumn, which will support the ongoing management of this risk event into the future. And then on page 159 and 160 are the final 2 risk events to present here as ones that the score has changed. These both sit under CR19 service improvement. First of all, we have CR19.1, failure to improve HMIC FRS judgments at next inspection. This risk event was reduced from 18 to 13 during a deep dive presentation at the January SLT meeting due to the progress being made on the causes of concern recommendations and actions to address areas for improvement. And then finally, CR 19.3 on page 160, inability to achieve transformation outcomes by the end of March 2025. This was also reduced at the January SLT deep dive from 15 to 11 due to plans in place to manage any remaining work packages and realise outcomes post-transformation. This is the last report of CR 19.3 as the transformation programme ends on the 31st of March. So this specific risk event will come out of the Corporate Risk Register. So if I can now ask you to please turn to Appendix 3 on page 161. The tables in Appendix 3 provide a summary of all 61 risk events in the full Corporate Risk Register as of the 26th of February, and this aims to provide additional context for the current risk scores and assurance for how the risk events are being monitored by both risk owners and service leaders. Appendix 4 on page 167 shows changes made to some of the risk appetite and tolerance levels, or the riskometers, following the Service Leadership Board review on the 15th of January. Full consideration was given to the practical aspect of how risk appetite and tolerance have influenced leadership oversight and scrutiny of risk events and decision-making going forward. And to ensure these riskometers remain of value, there is an SLB commitment to review them on at least an annual basis, if not earlier, for individual ones. And there's still some work to do around some of the key categories and the definitions of those categories and whether they are fit for purpose. So they will remain dynamic going forward. You have a lot of appendices for this report today. So on Appendix 5 on page 169 provides you with the usual risk scoring matrix and definitions of likelihood and impact. And Appendix 6 on page 171 shows the current schedule of planned corporate risk deep dive presentations to the SLT, which you asked to have access to on a regular basis so that you could see and have assurance on that. That is updated regularly, and things do sometimes have to change, and the SLT will request deep dives on an ad hoc basis if a risk raises concern. So that concludes my presentation of the Corporate Risk Register. So I'd like to open up for questions for myself, Caroline, or other officers that are here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorna. And before we start the discussion, I'd just like to ask members that if you have any questions or queries regarding risks in the exempt appendix, we will have to go into an exempt session to discuss those, but any other questions obviously now are fine. So, any questions? David.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the table on page 149 listing the dashboard. I note that the only reputational risk there is one about net zero, CR 21.3, which I'm gratified to see there being a Green Councillor. But I'm not seeing a reputational risk quantified in terms of the fire control report that we've just had. How is that risk actually quantified in this document, please?
Yes, absolutely. That reputational riskometer that you've just mentioned there is one that we're considering perhaps removing and sitting that risk event elsewhere, which it can do because we choose how they align, and actually bringing in a risk category that will be called culture, that will help to address these risks going forward. Because, like you said, the report that we've just looked at is covered under CR04 around people, capability, capacity and resilience, and also CR06, control and mobilising. But going forward, and with our new developed people services department, the areas around culture and diversity and equality need to be captured on here, perhaps elsewhere. So we are looking at whether it be a replacement for reputation, bearing in mind we do capture reputation as an impact, and it's part of our scoring of each risk event anyway, and whether it be better suited to have a culture one and to look at that. So that's under review at the moment, and we'll bring that to you back, an update on that back in June if that suits.
That's good to hear, because none of the CR04 risks are actually in the red. And given the seriousness of the report that we've just received, I would expect that to be right in the top right-hand corner in red. And we're not given that as an overview of the risk. I think that's really important to be able to actually understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously that reflects that this CR4 individual risk events that are captured under that category are capturing separate areas other than culture. So that would suit well to going forward. So that's on our to-do. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I was going to say it is on the bottom of page 167 as well, just to confirm that we've got a paragraph there saying that we've already identified the need for potentially a culture risk category. So it's just supporting what Lorna has said. So that's in the report as something we're reviewing. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorna, David and Caroline. David.
Thanks, Chair. There's a lot of really good information in here. It's really positive to see everything laid out in a way that's really, really accessible. But I just make a comment, which you have heard from me. I think the covering report might benefit from an overview to give committee a little bit more of a steer about the key points. However, the key points are present in all of the appendices. So I think that's excellent. But I just wanted to follow up one comment. You said something, you said on the 31st of March, the transformation programme ends. Yes? So what follows the transformation programme? That's my question. Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
I'll answer this. Right, so the transformation programme, they've identified what's been completed and what's left to be completed. And of the work streams that are left to be completed, it's been identified where they will now go into different areas of the business to carry on and complete those actions. We do have a continuous improvement register as well, where we're able to monitor the actions that are outstanding and provide assurance on those. So that is, they will now be managed in rather than a centralised programme, decentralised across the service under the relevant teams.
How will SLT know that transformation is being delivered if it's being decentralised? If I may, that's a follow-up. Thank you.
Sorry. It's just that particular programme. So we will still have a centralised team which is going to oversee key improvement work for the service. So they will still be there to support key programmes, but that was a digital transformation programme. So the majority of that particular programme is over, but we still have governance in place for central improvement of key portfolio improvement. I think Luke wants to come in as well.
Yeah, I think we've got a newly formed programme management office, and part of that team look after the governance around our continuous improvement, our improvement register. So through our day-to-day business now, which is embedded, that's how we govern the completion rates of those.
Can I also just add in, we've been in discussion recently with the service improvement team and the PMO around, do we need to have a new risk event sitting under CR19, and we explored the remit of the PMO and how they're going to manage the ongoing service improvement. And actually we realised that it wasn't necessary to, because they manage a project risk register themselves, and they've got the service improvement board and the internal improvement board, that actually we were going to start to duplicate risks that were already in the risk register. So that was a really useful piece of scrutiny and effort that went into that, and we've put that on hold for now. If necessary, we will introduce an additional risk event into CR19 if necessary.
Thank you. And can I just ask at this point if any members have questions around CR12 cybersecurity or CR17 building asset condition and physical security? No, that's great. We won't need to go into an exempt session then. The recommendations then are to scrutinise the corporate risk register in respect to the risks in this report and consider the controls and mitigations in place to manage these risks, and to consider whether the committee needs any further information to be assured of the appropriate management of these corporate risks. Any vote on this one?
Probably not. You have scrutinised and you have decided whether you need any further information, so I think we're okay.
Okay. Then that concludes agenda item 12. So the date of the next meeting is Friday 20th of June 2025 at 10:30 hours, with venue to be confirmed at the moment. That's great. I won't be there, so don't worry about that. If I can ask now comms to stop videoing the meeting.